How did it feel to actually be on top of the world, on the summit of Mount Everest?
Everyone says that when you are on the top, you conquer the world. But for me, I felt the mountain conquered me. The mountain is now inside me.
Ms. Rama Thakur, she's a professional mountaineer and outdoor enthusiast who has summited peaks like Everest, Kilimanjaro, Mount Dio, Tiba, Mount Lobuche, Mount Friendship.
It's not that a woman expires at 30. A woman just starts at 30. That in mountaineering, the boldest statement you can make is to climb the highest peak. Everest wasn't just a mountain. It became a message to the world. We are not done yet. What will push you further is the language of courage that only your heart knows. For mental toughness, one needs to move from being around the chaos to being within themselves.
First few expeditions, I didn't know how to pack my bags, organize a room, book a ticket, basic survival skills. I give these expeditions credit for independence, self-confidence. It really prepared me for life in university.
Mountain teaches us no one is privileged. Everyone will be treated the same way. When I went to Everest, 8 people lost their life to Everest. There was a Sherpa and he lost his life to the higher altitude. An African losing his life right next to the summit. You would think that I am privileged. I've done so many peaks, but the mountain test still not enough. You don't get to choose it. You need to stay humble. People come back broken when they don't listen to the mountains. Camp 2 to Camp 3, touched 7,000 meters at Camp 3. Wore a down suit that was meant for minus 40 degree. However, the next day, I got dehydrated. Climb, which was took me 4 to 5 hours. Soul was even giving up. Ribs were paining like anything. It seemed like it was going to pop up. Sleepless, body pain, back was aching, my ribs were aching. The weight of the rucksack was feeling too heavy. Not being able to eat anything, the only thing that I was surviving on was water. The goal is not to reach the goal. The goal is
So, Ms. Rama, I think I wanted to start this conversation with the most obvious point, and then we'll get into your mountaineering journey. But how did it feel to actually be on top of the world, on the summit of Mount Everest? What was generally going on in your mind and your heart during those few moments when you were at the top of the world?
well, actually, summiting Mount Everest was a dream that I had for very long time. I thought it would be very overwhelming. I thought that I'll have that sense of achievement, or I will be like crying when I reach the top of the world. But then when I reached on the top of the world, nothing of that sort happened with me. I felt very humbled, like being on the top of the world, seeing down, all the mountains were below me. They were all covered with cloud. And seeing that sun just popping up at that particular time, that golden line that we speak about, for the first time I witnessed that. And for me, it was more than anything else. It was a moment which made me feel very humbled, grateful, thankful to all the powers that came into existence for me to make me go all the way from base camp till the top and reach that summit. I never thought that I might come there. I would make it into the top. I never thought that this dream of 18 years or 17 years would come true for me one day uh, without any kind of lackings in between. But then, yes, it made me feel humbled. It made me feel thankful um, to the mountains. I felt everyone says that when you are on the top, you conquer the world, you conquer the mountain. But for me, I felt more like the mountain conquered me. And the mountain is now inside me. I live it with me. Uh, it's just the feeling that it really makes you think that what, as a human, you feel you're too big, or you feel that, yes, you have achieved everything in your life. But then mountains always teach you, and Everest is the best place that teaches you that you still have a lot to do. That's a very introspecting kind of a feeling that I had on the top. Rather than feeling joyful and shouting on top of my voice, I was more contemplating when I was on the top.
And what time was it when you were on the summit, if you remember?
Yeah, so I submitted with the Nepalese time. It's 4:30 in the morning. I had submitted, and I was there for nearly 45 minutes.
Wow.
And it doesn't feel like the time is passing by. It just felt like I had just reached. But then by the time I was going back, my Sherpa was telling me, please start moving because your oxygen will get over. Please start moving. But then those 45 minutes, observing things around me, seeing people summit, seeing people leave, come back from the other side, from the north side, south side, it was marvelous. Like I didn't feel like I spent 45 minutes to 1 hour on the top. Yeah, this is 4:30 in the morning.
Did you leave anything on the top? Like I remember from movies that people leave a flag of their country or some very valuable belonging. Did you leave anything on top of Everest?
Not really. Personally, I don't believe in leaving anything in the mountains. Being a mountaineer, we always do speak about leave no trace, which means when you go to the mountains and you come back, people should not know that you were there, that you had been there. So you should take everything back with you. But yes, every stop has a lot of litter. Over the years, it becomes litter. It could be the flags, it could be someone leaving their personal belongings. It could be that few people even leave. Like last to last year, there was a doll that was left on the top. There might be significant importance for that person who's leaving it there, but then it creates a lot of disharmony in terms of how glaciers work. So it is not good for the environment. At least not me. I didn't leave anything.
Awesome. I think this is just a trailer. We're going to get into a much deeper conversation about Everest, mountaineering, your entire journey. I'll very quickly introduce this episode and you. So welcome to Midway Up. I'm your host, Arya Tarot. Today I'll be sitting down for an exciting conversation with Ms. Rama Thakur. She's a professional mountaineer and outdoor enthusiast who has summited peaks like Everest, Kilimanjaro, Mount Dio, Tiba, I hope I'm saying that right, Mount Lobuche, Mount Friendship, and hopefully, if maybe within a year, leaving for an expedition to Annapurna. She's also a leadership trainer at the Indus School of Leadership. She has worked with hundreds of teenagers and young adults to develop their soft skills and teach them teamwork, resilience, discipline, communication, and a lot more outside of the classroom. Broadly, this episode, we're going to have two sections. First, we'll be discussing her mountaineering journey and all the crucial lessons she has learned from her time in the outdoors, in nature, in the mountains. Second, we're going to be talking about her experience working with so many diverse teenagers, young adults in leadership training, and some reflections on the same, like the importance of teenagers spending time outdoors, away from the screens and outside of the classroom in the mountains. So, Ms. Rama, I want to rewind back in time and give some context to the audience. If you had to go back in time and recap your mountaineering journey, how did this all begin and how were you able to convert mountaineering from a passion into something that is now a full-time career?
Okay, I grew up in a small village in Manali, Himachal Pradesh. Working by the Bias River or going on trails every single day was a very homely thing for me. It was natural for me to do all those things. Back those days, we didn't even know that there is a profession called mountaineering or there is something called the outdoor adventure. We didn't know. For us, it was just a daily life, day-to-day work that we used to do. But then there came a time when one of my dad's friend, he recommended that you have 3 daughters. Would you want to send one of them for a mountaineering course? The Mountaineering Institute is just 2 kilometers away from my home, but we never know what was happening in that institute. And luckily, me being the sportsy person who was into basketball, volleyball, badminton, and all, my parents said, "Okay, we'll send her." And I say it was fortunate that the future opened the gates for me, and I happened to step inside. And I was just in grade 12 when I took the decision that this is going to be the future for me. I did the courses, which were sponsored, of course, and then I became a mountaineering instructor at Abhimas, Manali. And my journey started from there. But then over the time, I would say more than a profession, for me, it was passion. And I found a purpose in what I'm doing, especially after coming to Indus School of Leadership. I found a purpose in more of a purpose in what I'm doing. And I'm very happy with how I'm performing and what I'm doing with my life right now. So I believe that passion naturally follows when what you like and your purpose, those become clearer to you. So I would say if it has to be told in terms of my professional career, how it came up, that would be a sum of it.
And I'm curious, what made you so passionate about spending time in the mountains and doing these expeditions? I feel like many of us enjoy it, but for me, maybe I enjoy it 1 week out of 52 weeks, and for the 51 weeks, I am doing like maybe a more traditional work. what was it that you loved and that drew you so much to the mountains and to these expeditions to do it full time, like every week of the year?
It started with me being a introspective person. I really love to introspect and I really love to think about things happening, why they are happening, the way they are happening. And mountains gave me a free space. The outdoors gave me a free space to explore that side of mine. So when I was in the mountain, I really enjoyed my own company. When you come back to the city, you're in the city, you're doing your own work and all. You're very much occupied, and that's one thing that I don't like. I like to be with myself. I like to introspect. I like to talk a lot with the nature, with myself. So when I went to the mountains for the first time, second time, I realized that people, not only me, but others who were there with me, we all come to an understanding where we become very genuine. You know, our emotions are genuine. The way we talk, that is genuine. What we feel about a certain thing is genuine when you're sharing it. But then back when you come to the cities, people fabricate a lot. But that doesn't happen in nature. Everything is very genuine there. Everything just comes out like that. And I love that part that I am able to be with people who are genuine and I'm able to be genuine for myself as well. So it just started from there. And then, of course, expedition after expedition, I really found a way, a reason to go back every single time. Maybe the same expedition, but if someone tells me that this is an expedition that is being organized, would you want to be a part of it? I would never say no. Even if it is in Bangalore itself, right now, if someone tells me, okay, this is a track I'm going to, I never say no unless it is a commitment that I've already given at a professional front and I don't have time. That would be the only time I would say no. But otherwise, there's no to exploring and having more adventures in my life.
It's so true because I feel like I'm, in this sense, very different from you, where I feel like I spend most of my time in a classroom setting or in a city setting, and maybe 1 or 2 weeks of the year I'm going to nature and in the mountains. And I've always felt that whenever I go on these expeditions and these like peak experiences, even if I'm going with complete strangers and if the expedition is 7 days, by the end of the 7 days, I really feel like even if I'm not of like I've made some very good, almost lifelong friends from some of these experiences. Even if I've not like made a deep friendship with someone, I feel like I genuinely understand that person so much better than if we had spent a week or even 2 weeks in a city context. I feel that in a classroom setting, in a university setting, in an internship setting, we have been like fake to each other for months at a time, like knowing and seeing the person every day. We have still put on a certain face. But I feel like even for me, something about like the challenge of the mountains and the beauty of the nature kind of brings out a very authentic side of me, which I think is what you're getting at. Uh,
Yes, exactly. So when you make connections in the mountain, they go a long way. Like because you now know the vulnerable side of theirs and you know the strengths of those people who were around you. And you were with them during the ups and downs. So the relations created, the bonds created, they go really long way. So that's a very good part about the mountains.
Makes sense. So you summited Everest 2 years ago in 2024, and you were just mentioning to me that you spent your 37th birthday on the mountain. I've kind of two questions which are very related. The first is why did you choose Everest, and the second, which I'm even more interested in, is I feel that many people conquer Everest when they're on the younger side, when they're in their 20s. I'm curious why it took you so long to then get into the Everest expedition.
Uh, well, I believe that age is just a number when it comes to taking up challenges or taking up risks. I chose to summit Mount Everest because of many things that were going ongoing around me, and there was a painful fact that I couldn't resist, and it kept me waking throughout the night. Was that because when I entered my 30s and I looked back at my colleagues, the ladies who worked with me hand in hand, I saw all of them vanishing, all of them taking a step back, not because they were not capable, but because the society told them, or the families told them, relations told them that this is the time you take a break. You're not going back to mountaineering anymore. Now you should be taking care of your family, you should be taking care of your other responsibilities. And that was something that really made me think, why is it that a woman is, even if she wants to choose her career in mountaineering. So I'm not speaking about someone who goes on the mountains for just for climbing. I'm speaking about the profession. people who are into guiding, becoming an instructor, taking people to the mountain, having their bread and butter earned from mountaineering. Why do they have to give up, especially women have to give up their profession after 30s or after getting married? So that was something that kept bothering me a lot. And why is it that the society or the family or the people around us starts judging us by an age? They start judging us by the way we look, probably the body structure that we get into after 30s. And then it's not that a woman expires at 30. A woman just starts at 30. So that was a thing that came into my head. And after having a lot of conversation with my mentors back then, I realized something very powerful, that in mountaineering, the boldest statement you can make is to climb the highest peak on this earth. So I had to make a bold statement where I could prove it to the world that if I can, they can as well. And so having said that, Everest for me wasn't just a mountain. It became a message to the world that we are not done yet. So just with that message, for me, Everest was the only answer to all the chaos that was happening inside my head.
And do you feel like after you summited and you came down and you had conversations like this, did that do anything to reduce or solve the chaos? Like, do you feel that it's clear now, or is it still something that's troubling you?
Well, I think consistency is something that is definitely required. Even if you summit Everest, it's not the end of the world. It's not the only mountain that you have to summit. Yes, there is chaos still in my head. It's lesser than what I had earlier. But yes, I was able to inspire quite a few ladies with whom I speak, especially to take up challenges. It doesn't mean that they have to go to Everest. It just means that they have to continue with whatever profession they are in, whatever ambitions they had in their 20s. They should also continue it in 30s. And the fact that they are in their 30s does not make them weak. So that, yes, the change I'm able to see, if you're speaking about that. But if you say that you've become a change maker and the world has changed now, I believe I'm not there yet. There's a long way to go.
Now that we're anyway on this topic, I just want to dive in a bit further into this gender disparity, I would call it, like on the mountains and adventure. Speaking from my own personal experience, I've gone on multiple expeditions with you. I would say the more challenging ones we went on, so Manali to Leh cycling, Mount Kilimanjaro, a few of the other peaks. A few of them were, I've been on expeditions which were like Mount Fuji. My expedition was entirely boys. Most of the other expedition is 80 to 90% boys. So maybe there's like 12 guys and 2 or 3 girls on the expedition. And I've noticed this as a very recurring pattern. It's something that I'm curious about, and I think also disturbs me, because I think more than just the mountain and the expedition itself, I think it's sending a message to our society that it's the boys who are taking risks and getting out of their comfort zone and pushing their limits, whereas the girls are very much in their comfort zone and not taking those risks or challenges. And this has influence from family and culture and society. So it's something which kind of disturbs me, because I truly feel if more girls spend time on the mountains and do these challenging expeditions, regardless of whether or not they summit, I think it will like fundamentally change the way they think and the way they approach challenges in their life and become more daring outside of the mountain context. So I'm just curious if you have thoughts on this, about the problem, about potential solutions. How do you generally feel about what I just said?
So I think people might not like me for what I'm saying right now, but I think it is because, the society out there is still not that safe for women. When I say this, it is coming out from every mother's heart. When you're sending your daughter out as a mother, as a father, you still have that second thought which you don't have for a son. You just send them out like that, right? You wait for the daughter to become mature enough where she's able to now physically and mentally able to take care of herself. Or they look for a safety net for parents. Let's say when I'm speaking about safety net, it is about how much assurance are you able to give them that your daughter will be safe. She will come back safe, and emotionally and physically there would be no harm done to your daughter. Which usually does not happen in terms of when we speak about men, boys. That question is not asked. So since I have been conducting expeditions since last 18 years for different crowd, usually it is much more tougher to convince the parents. It's not the girl, I believe, since she's at a tender age. A girl or a boy does not know this discrimination. They do not know why they should come at a particular age and why they should restrain from coming at a particular age. But I think it comes from the mindset that we have when it comes to the safety of a girl. And if you have more entrepreneurs, more of leaders who are women, and it becomes much more assuring that if there is anything, I will take care of her. I will be with her. She will go off next to me. That gives a lot of assurance to parents. But yes, still there are quite a few parents who do not get assured and they would like to take some time to think. But I think nowadays it is changing. The fact that when I did mountaineering, there were out of five courses that were being organized, only two of them were for women, open for women. The rest three were not even open for women. And now all the courses are open for women. During my time, there were only 4 women compared to 40 men. The ratio was just 4%. And if you speak about any expedition, the ratio is only 4 to 6%, which is now, like you said, it is going up to 20%. Like you said, 80% of them were men, and the rest of them were the ladies or the girls. So the ratio is going up. Now parents are trusting the world around, but there's a long way to go. So pretty deep, but yes, I think safety net has to be built for the girls to come out because there's much at stake. Frankly speaking, there is much at stake when a girl comes out of the safety net, comes out in the mountaineering or comes out to any place. Even though mountaineering is very safe, I've been there for 18 years. I feel cities are much unsafe place for a girl than mountains. But then parents or the adults who have not been to mountaineering expeditions, who have not trusted anyone with their kids, they don't know this fact. They're yet to build that fact.
This next question is gender neutral. It applies for parents of both boys and girls. I actually feel so lucky and so grateful that my parents never asked too many questions. If I was interested in expedition, they would basically look at the itinerary and have a few basic concerns fleshed out. But then they were very quick to let me go. In fact, many of the cases when I didn't want to go, my parents would push me and send me on the expedition, which is like super rare. I always feel like it's the child who wants to, in my experience, it's always the child who wants to go and the parents who are holding them back for various reasons. I think parents have, at least according to them, very like logical concerns of, for boys and girls, safety of the child, if anything happens on the mountain. To be honest, like not able to have that trust. Exactly, not able to have trust in people who are going along. Honestly, like sacrificing academics or sacrificing exams. So now if you had to speak directly to parents who are watching this episode, I'm just curious what you would tell them when they come to you with such concerns about why they should still send their children on expeditions into the mountains. What is the change they can expect to see in their children when they go on such challenging expeditions?
Well, I always do speak with parents, and this definitely is a concern when we speak with the parents. Different parents, again, have different ways of getting convinced. Few of them are just concerned about the safety. And since they are concerned about safety, I take it as triple protocol that I will come up with 3 line of contingency plans. If they have an issue with the flight, I'll come up with a second plan about the flight, third plan about the flight. If they have an issue about what will happen to my child when the child is on the hills and now the child is not able to climb, what will happen? First, of course, is the motivation and all. If medically the child goes down, let's say has fever or falls or something happens, what will happen? So I give them medical aids. I tell them about how medically they'll be taken care of. And then the third one is who will take care of them while we are going on the hike. And this particular child of yours, if he or she is not able to climb, how we will take care of that particular child. So we go on telling all the contingency plans, even if it is about evacuating the child from there, getting them to the city, getting them to the hospital, or getting them to wherever it is necessary at that particular time to get them till there. We do all the contingency plans. Though, of course, till now, touch wood, there's never been a chance for me where I had to execute my contingency plans. But then, yes, it definitely helps in convincing parents. And second thing is about the change, what change they will see in the child. I think since when you are in the outdoors, right, there's a lot that goes, introspection that goes, and the real you comes out. I don't know that real you of that child at that particular time, right? So if I say that this is the change that is going to happen in your child, the parent might backfire me and the parent might say, ki, my child is already like that though, right? So I only go on saying that you will see a different Arya when he comes back. You will definitely see a change in him. You should tell us after your first expedition if the change was positive or negative, and if you like the change that has happened in your child. Because usually they'll come more disciplined, they will come more humbled, they will become more self-aware now, and they'll be more thankful to the parents as well, grateful to the parents for the all the the kind of luxuries that they have at home, the kind of love, care, and people they have at home. They really miss them during those days. They miss the comfort that they had at home. So coming out of comfort zone really does help in bringing out the best out of anyone. So that would be my answer to it. If I had to give the answers, then yes, I would go on telling about disciplines, heightened self-awareness. I would go on talking about how they will be more now thankful, humble, more human. I'd speak about those, but otherwise, I would really request them to send them for once. If all the safety criteria are met, I would tell them, you tell us after coming back, you tell us what are the changes that you see in your child now. In fact, they become much more independent because probably that is their first expedition. They are coming with us. And many of the children, many of the students, they don't even know how to pack their bags. They don't know how to pack a sweater or probably a t-shirt. So they get to know how to organize their life, how to organize their room, how to know or pack things and where to keep things. They get to know all about it during an expedition.
It's so true because I feel I have spent my 12 years of education never in boarding. So I've always lived at home, went to school, came back, very predictable and stable routine. I completely agree with that. Like if you had asked me back in grade 5 or 6 when I went on my first few expeditions outside of Hyderabad, I didn't know how to pack my bags, I didn't know how to organize a room, I didn't know how to book a ticket, I didn't know basic survival skills. And to be honest, I give these expeditions so much credit for giving me that level of independence and responsibility and self confidence in myself that I think it really prepared me for life in university. I feel like a lot of listeners, if they are teenagers, maybe they've spent their entire childhood and adolescence at home and they're hoping to go to university in a different city or even a different country. I feel that these peak experiences and expeditions were the only experiences I could draw on when I had to go and spend 4 months or 8 months in a different country, figuring everything out away from home and family. I think I drew from some of the lessons and the strength and the confidence I built from these experiences. So I think even going forward in life, when you want to study in a new city, you want to work in a new city, these are the expeditions which I think you draw on and they build that self-confidence, that self-assurance that I can live outside of this comfort bubble of home and family. So I think that's so true. This is also for you personally, but also more in general, for example, for the students you work with. Talk to me about the preparation journey for a challenging expedition. So let's say tomorrow, let's say I have a decent level of fitness. I come to you and I say, hey, hi, ma'am. I want to, in 3 to 6 months, I want to be on the top of Mount Kilimanjaro or I want to be at Everest Base Camp. So both for your personal experience and also the students you work with, what is the physical, emotional, mental training and preparation that goes on in those few months to make the person ready to actually then go and try to conquer the peak? And the reason I'm mentioning physical, emotional, mental is I wouldn't have believed this if you had told me before about all of this visualization and mental toughness and visualizing yourself on the summit. But I truly feel like when my body was tired, those mental exercises took me to the top. And so that's why I'm also emphasizing a lot on the mental and emotional side of preparation.
See, I think, Arya, you have been with 2 expeditions with me, which were more challenging. And I think you have the answer to it. However, yes, pitch in as and when, of course, you would want to. The first thing that I ask the child, if they are stepping by themselves and they are telling me that they would like to do this particular thing, I ask them, why is it that you want to do this particular thing only? Like I would want anyone, of course, I would want them to start from a very basic dose. Let's say go on hikes first, then go for some treks. After that, you go for expeditions, and then you go for 6,000 meters, and then 7,000 meters. That would be the gradual progression. Now, if someone wants to skip a progression, I would want to know why is it that you are interested in, let's say, Kilimanjaro. Why are you interested in it? Now, there comes a time when few students will have answer to it and few of them will not have answer to it. So when they don't have an answer to it, I say, okay, that is fine. Now that there's a thought for you, go back, think about it, why you want to do it, because that why is going to help you. That will become your mental toughness ka biggest selling point when you are at a tougher situation, right? If you're pushed by your parents only, or if you're pushed by rewards and awards, probably that might not push you much further. What will push you further is the language of courage that only your heart knows. Right? So, why do you want to do it? That only your heart knows, and you need to know it, why you want to do it. Okay, sometimes it is for the teenagers. Most of the times it is about proving themselves. Right? We have this thing that I'm living a mundane life. It is that, oh, my friends are doing so many things. I'm not doing anything at all. Am I worthy of doing certain thing or not? Sometimes it is that push as well that takes a teenager into stepping into doing such things, right? And then I go on asking them about their physical workout regimes, if they have any. I go on asking them if they have, are they asthmatic or not? Do they have any medical conditions or not? So once the basic checks are done, so I tell them, okay, now we're going to prepare ourselves for this expedition over the next 1 or 2 months. Usually, I believe if it is not a technical peak, you can get prepared for a particular peak within not more than 45 days. So 1.5 months is enough for you to get prepared for an expedition, which is not technical. If it is technical, yes, you need a lot of time, especially in the field, training yourself about the technical details of how things goes when you are on the mountains. So usually, yes, with the younger ones, with the youth, we take them to a peak which is not highly technical. So after that, we start with the physical training, and as we increase the physical training, we go on speaking to them about meditation. We go on speaking to them about yoga, about cardio, different types of workouts which help you not only physically but it helps you mentally as well. The more you are into meditation, it makes you talk to yourself, which is very difficult. Uh, Probably you are one of the very least number of students that I've seen who introspects a lot, who is into talking with themselves a lot, and they are comfortable with it. Otherwise, the youth nowadays finds it very difficult to spend time with themselves. So when you're doing meditation, when they're doing meditation, there's a lot of chaos going on in the head. But then when that calms down, that really brings their strength out. Youth has a lot of strength, of course. The students have a lot of strength, especially till grade 12, till graduation. There's a lot of potential in them that can be tapped on. So that gets tapped on when we speak about all these things. And when we speak about the why, that gets in their values. That gets in what they really resonate with, what would they really like to carry forward. As knowing myself as Rama Thakur, what should I be known for? If I'm going to this particular peak, what is it that after coming back, I would like to tell people about the peak, about myself, and about the journey? Right? It's not only about the summit that I would want to speak. I would want to speak about all those 11 days that I spent away from my family, eating the food which looked very colorful but had no taste. Right? So, am I enjoying the food, seeing the food, or seeing the kind of staying arrangements that were there, the washroom arrangements? What were the thoughts that went through me? Right? How did it shape me to becoming what I became later? So, with those introspections, like the entire thing is for mental toughness, one needs to move from being around the chaos to being within themselves. So that comes with meditation. So they get physically prepared by doing the workouts for 45 days. And then mentally, they get prepared by answering questions like, why should I climb there? What is it that would make me go ahead? And what is it that would make me come back, step down? And asking a lot of questions to themselves whenever they are with themselves, or asking a lot of questions to the trainers or even to the participants, to the other climbers. When you're asking questions, I remember you always ask questions when you are on breaks and all, you keep asking questions, right? So I believe you gain insights when you ask questions. And these insights are not the insights that you would get in any books. These are insights which are about life, about how to take up challenges, about how to take risks, and how to negotiate risk probably, and about how to take smart decisions whenever the decisions are required, when to stop, when to start, when to pace up, right?
Awesome. There was so much packed into that answer. I think we can unpack now bits and pieces, and I have multiple follow ups, but I'm just going to try and add in a few small pointers from my own experience with preparing. Although I think you covered majority. A few of the top lessons I think I gained from preparing for these expeditions. One is, especially as a young person, whatever timeline you set for yourself to achieve a goal, I think if you increase the determination and the focus, you can almost half or one third that timeline. So if you feel it takes 6 months or 9 months to prepare for something, with double the focus and double the rigor and a very strong why, I think you can bring that down and you can crush that down. So I think that was a very powerful insight for me, because I realized that all of the goals I set for myself, the 1 year goals, the 3 year goals, I realized if I actually focused and I really wanted to achieve something, I could bring that timeline down and I could do in 6 months what I had planned to do in a year with double the focus and double the determination. So that was a big insight. I think the second was the power of visualization. I think this is so important for goals, not only like summits. This is about being able to vividly see yourself and build that trust and that faith that this is something you can achieve. Because if it's a peak, if, for example, you've never gone on an expedition before, it's very hard to even have that internal faith of being able to do this, because you don't have any reference points or any past experience to draw on or past confidence. So I think visualization brings that confidence before you actually get on the mountain. And I truly feel it's hard for me to exactly pinpoint, but something like a gut feeling tells me that this was a key for my summiting of Mount Kilimanjaro, even after all the workouts and everything which I followed to the best I could, after the physical strength was done, I think that little bit of willpower was from the visualization. So I think those are the quick points I wanted to add. But for me, truly, like you said, and I think I've heard this from other people who also are into marathons or athletes, mountaineers, the training process, so the journey before even starting the actual event or the climb, is also so important, because as you said, it's not just about the 30 minutes you spend on the summit, it's about the 11 days you take to reach that summit, because the journey is about who you become in the process. So I think for me, much more important than being able to tell someone, oh, I summited this mountain or I finished this expedition, I have this medal. I think this is this is the before and after of who I became as a result of taking on this challenging journey. So that is what I wanted to add. My follow-up question to you is, especially at this age where self-confidence can be a very fragile thing for teenagers, where it can be easily taken to the next level and it can be easily broken as well. I have myself experienced and seen around me how not being able to summit a mountain became too intertwined with someone's identity and self-worth, and they would carry that guilt in them for weeks or for months of not being able to make a certain. I think a little bit of that is healthy, but too much of that becomes like unhealthy and you lose self-confidence. And so I'm just curious, when you go on expeditions, I'm sure in most of the challenging expeditions, there's some who summit, some who are close to the summit, and some who maybe only reach halfway, or they are not even close to the summit. Especially for the students who are not able to make it to the top and who are kind of beating themselves up and feeling guilty, what is the kind of dialogue and conversation you have with such students?
Well, usually with me, the students were not submitted. It's usually because they had either they had certain kind of medical conditions, or it would be because they didn't want to. So there are only two types, right? It is not because of any third type that you don't submit. Okay, especially the peaks that we are speaking about. It is not because they were natural calamities. It is not because of the rope breakage or because of certain technical issues that you had to turn back. There are only two ways. One is medical. Since it is medical, so I always have a conversation around medical details. I do speak to them about how they should take care of their day-to-day life, how they're living, what they're eating, how they're spending time, with whom they are spending time, because all these small habits that makes a part of the bigger expedition. Otherwise, an expedition in itself cannot change a person who has been obese, who has been diabetic. It will not change overnight, right? So we need to have a healthy lifestyle. So I speak about that with them, and I always tell them that there's always a second chance. The mountain is not going anywhere, right? You're not able to conquer it today, but tomorrow you will be able to conquer it. You just need to work on yourself. So let's start working on ourselves. In the next expedition, whenever I'm conducting an expedition, that person would be the first person whom I would contact and I would tell him or her, this is an expedition I'm organizing. Would you want to sign up for it? Where are you in terms of your physical health and your medical health? So that is my way of motivating them that now I'm following up with you. See, I'm very much aware that you were not at that point not able to submit, but I believe in you. I trust you. And since I trust you, you should trust yourself and let's make it happen together. So that's one way of elevating them. The other way is when someone doesn't want to do it, they would come up with excuses of telling that, oh, the trainer probably did not pay attention to, my needs. The second one would be that they would say, oh, this hike was not so intriguing to me. Or most of the times they would either say that I have climbed the wrong bus. Okay, I didn't think that I was here for a summit. And now I got to know that this is a challenging thing and I wanted to just enjoy it, chill for these 7, 8 months, 7, 8 days. So for there, we can't do much because they actually do not look at it as their goal. Since they don't look at it as their goal, let them enjoy their life. If they look at it as their goal, then it makes sense for me to push them to submit or to even have a conversation about why to submit and why not to submit. So with those kind of students, with those kind of youth, I speak with them regarding having a clarity. So it is mostly about having clarity of where you are and where you want to go. Right. So if you didn't know about the expedition, getting more clarity about the expedition would have helped them. It would have helped the student in terms of not spending that much of a time, resource, right, emotions into coming for this 8 to 10 days expedition. And then at the end, realizing this is not what I wanted. Usually with youth, that also happens with their career, with their choices that they make in their life. Since they don't have that clarity, they just go on taking a particular subject, they just go on going to a particular university. And then later they realize, oh, this is not what I wanted. Once they sit in the classroom, they read about what's happening in that particular subject. Right. So that's also a big life lesson that comes out of such failures. So we speak about that with them then. And if it is about not being physically prepared, sometimes students do come unprepared for an expedition, and then they feel overwhelmed after climbing few, of course, kilometers. Their body is not ready for it, right? They didn't do any workout, nothing. And now all of a sudden for 11 days, you're telling your body to straight away walk every single day for 10 to 15 kilometers. It's not a justice you're doing to your body. So when your body gives up, your heart gives up, and then the expedition fails for you. And at that particular time, you feel, no, this is the best decision. Let me step back. Let me just rest for today. And when your friends come back and when you talk with them, you feel that's the time when when the student would feel the most, would have that feeling of failure in themselves. And they would be like, oh, what have I missed? Why did I miss this? I should have tried. These instances, it has happened with us as well when we were in the expedition. So that does happen. And that's when I believe the peer pressure that is created there is a good peer pressure, where now few of them are celebrating their successes, but few of them are also regretting their choices of not taking those extra steps. So while that chaos is happening in that, the person who did not submit, they come to a conclusion that I'll come back. I'll make it happen. I will come back. And it's not forced upon them by anyone, not by the peer who is climbing with them, not by the trainers, not by anyone. But it's just a realization that just happens that, oh, I should have woke up. I should have just started walking. I was physically very fit, but I just didn't want to do it. Or probably I was physically not fit. So it's a question for me. Why did I come to this expedition without getting physically prepared for it? So if people start introspecting, realizing, I believe failure teaches way too many things. Failure is a very good teacher for you to introspect, for us to introspect, and to learn from the failures. So the ones who do not submit, they speak a lot about bouncing back. They would speak a lot about getting mentally and physically prepared for the next expedition that they would take up. And believe me, these students would not take up anything that is lesser challenging than what was offered during that particular time. So that's the beauty of a failure, that you go on exploring yourself all the more and putting yourself into a risk or into a territory that is new for you. Because now you enjoy it, being there and not being able to push yourself. Now you know that you have a limit which is limitless, and the limit is in your head. So you prepare yourself better for the next expectation, right?
Yeah, I was smiling the whole time because you almost read my mind. I feel like this was exactly what was going on. I can share a very personal experience of exactly just to confirm what you said. So, in my experience, grade 8, I went to Mount Fuji and I went with very minimal preparation, no physical, very low physical toughness or mental toughness. It was, I had, now looking back, I was 300 meters from the summit. I gave up and I stopped and I gave myself these exact excuses of it's okay, it's not that important. I thought it would be more enjoyable. I thought it would be more relaxing. I wasn't prepared with the weather, the clothing, 100 different excuses, which is all easier ways to self-justify because it's hard to face a harsher truth of like, hey, I am not reaching my full potential and I am giving up here. Looking back, I was an hour away from the summit. I came down. Most of my colleagues were celebrating because I was one of the very, like, the 10% of people who did not end up making it to the top. I think it triggered so much introspection and so much of this grit and determination, which was, as you said, to next time not even not even go back and summit the same peak, but go and summit a more challenging peak. And I give complete credit to this Mount Fuji temporary failure, I will call it, to give me that motivation, that courage to then go and summit Mount Kilimanjaro with something to actually prove. And so, what I think disturbs me a lot about teenagers today is if you never tried, you will never even experience that failure. And that failure can be hard for a few weeks or a few months, but ultimately, the person it makes you become, I think, will serve you for the rest of your life. But if you don't even put yourself in those situations and have those failures, I think it's very easy to then say like, "Hey, I didn't have a success, but I also didn't have a failure," and I think that is much worse off than someone who went and failed miserably. Like I have much more respect for the person who still went and had those introspective moments. Um, I wanted to ask you about this
At
because
least they tried, right?
exactly, at least they
I'm
tried.
saying at least they tried and they're learning from it, right? So
Exactly.
it is a step forward. They are growing rather than getting stuck at one place. These people, these students who are trying, they are growing.
I wanted to ask you along very similar lines of this. I feel that a lot of teenagers have natural tendencies. There is one camp of teenagers which always stops before they reach their full potential. So they struggle with pushing themselves and getting themselves out of the comfort zone. They always want to be very comfortable and secure. And I would say I generally fall into this camp. So I was very aware of that before going into expeditions, that I will not be able to push myself to the fullest. I want someone else to push me, and that someone else will be the person to tell me when I should stop or if I should keep going. And I think that worked out beautifully because then I just completely gave the responsibility to someone who was more experienced. I didn't listen to my own body and mind, and I just followed the other person and their signals, and I had faith in them. The other camp of students, I think this is a minority, but I've seen this in some friends where they push themselves too much. So even if everyone around them is telling them to stop and their health is not supporting and they have medical issues, they have this strong maybe fear of failure, this strong sense of determination to go and make it to the top, which I think can be healthy to a certain extent, but after a point you're actually risking your health and yourself, and you're burning out basically, even in a natural work setting. And so I'm wondering, when you work with different types of students, some of whom are more lazy and don't push themselves, and some of them who push themselves too much, how do you actually find that balance between pushing yourself to the right amount or pushing yourself to a point where you are reaching your potential and challenging yourself, but you are not burning out and causing harm to yourself? Do you have a general sense of how to find this balance when you've worked with all of these students?
I would say that's a very tricky question, or very, of course, a question which is asking for the magic wand now from me. Uh, yes, there are, of course, I would say, with a lot of experience, when you go on conducting programs for the youth, for the younger ones, we do come through different energies. We do come across different types of students who are brought up, who not brought up, but who believe in different ways of expressing themselves. One would be the shy one. Probably this would be the ones who would want to rely on someone else telling about how much to work and how much not to work, how much to eat, not to eat, and do particular things. There's another category as well who would want to be informed. They would really want to stay informed about what's happening next. Okay, if it's an 8 day cycling, that's you, yes. If it's an 8 day cycling, I'm just done with one. So I have to store my energy for the next 7 days as well. Right. So few of the students go very calculative and they have their own way of making things work. Right. And they will push themselves. But again, yes, like you said, they would also go back to getting a reassurance from the trainer, from the elders, from the experts about, am I pushing myself too much? Am I knowing my limits? Or are you knowing my limits? Would you stop me when it is time for me to stop? I should not harm myself. Right? So you're very much on conscious, very much aware about yourself. And then there are the third types. It does take some time to figure out which student falls in which category, but it doesn't take a lot of time. It just takes nearly 2 to 3 hours for us with an active interaction with them and with the kind of probably the first exercise that we would do with them. We get to know the differences between all three category of students. We will also have students who would be more so coming from a background where they would not be getting that kind of an assurance in the classroom. Probably they are not performing well in the classroom, and probably they are being made fun of in the classroom by their classmates. Usually, that is very common in the teenagers, right? So you are pulled down because you are not athletic. Sometimes you are pulled down because you're too studious, right? So that could be this could be the third type where the student now thinks that this is the platform where I have to prove myself no matter what. Then they go on not caring about the blisters that they are getting on their foot. They don't bother about them getting dehydrated, them painting. They would still say, I'm gonna stand up and I'm gonna still do it. Irrespective of the fact that if you do it now, physically it is going to harm you. Right. So initially, when we get to know about students, we have different types of conversation with different students. With such students, we would go on talking. I would go on to I'd go on as a counselor more so, lesser as a trainer. I'd speak more about with them. I'd speak more about how they can find, peace in just being themselves, and they don't have to prove themselves to anyone. They are unique. They will stay unique. So they have to go with that mindset that I'm not here to prove my worth to my classmates. I'm here to prove my worth to myself. And I will define how much I want to prove it. Right. And then set those boundaries. Usually, yes, it takes some time for them to come back to their understanding that if she's telling me to stop, I have to stop. And sometimes it takes a little bit of a longer time. They fall, they don't listen, they fall, then they fall sick, they sit in an ambulance or they stay in a car for a day, and then they realize, okay, very bad idea, we should have listened. Right? So that's why they're called expedition, because they are meant to get you through those ups and downs. For every type of a student, they will go through different ups and downs during this expedition and come to a realization where they would say, that day, ma'am, or that day, sir, when you had spoken with me, I should have realized. Or when Arya had spoken with me and he told me to eat healthy food, I should have listened to him. Right. So those realizations, they kick in these peak experiences that we speak about. So the duration matters a lot. The kind of intensity that workout will bring in, that matters a lot for such kind of changes to happen. But tricky, yes. But within 2-3 hours, it's very much doable. You are very much able to identify different types of students.
I'm sure it's very subjective also, because what motivates one student may not motivate the other. And so what pushes me to get to the top is for someone else a very lame motivation, and for them maybe it's something else. And so this is where I agree so much with you saying that it's very important to understand the psychology of the student who's getting into the expedition. And honestly, if the student is able to understand that for themselves, that's amazing. Like if you're able to understand your own blind spots and weaknesses and your own patterns, am I doing this to prove something to somebody, your own insecurities? For me, I would say these are some of the amazing reflections I got after the expedition. So during the expedition, maybe it's not actively on my mind, but when I reflect on the expedition after, some of these things come up. So I think it's very interesting. I want to bring back to what you were just talking about, but also something you mentioned earlier in the episode, because I think it's such an important lesson for teenagers. Two things you mentioned about obedience and about humility. And so I want to touch on both of them, and I think they are very well connected. I feel that in today's world, with access to the internet, a lot of teenagers have really become know-it-alls. They feel that, and I really was in this case, so I'm able to articulate this as well. I really feel when I was 15, 16, 17, I had these long periods of disagreement and arrogance and ego with my parents when they're telling me something, because I feel that with my access to technology and my information and the studying I'm doing, that I know what is best for me. Whereas what I have is more so knowledge and not experience, which are two very, very different things. And so I think going into the mountains, it taught me so much of obedience and listening to people who are more experienced and wiser than you. And also humility, I think, as well, because some teenagers can feel overconfident and almost invincible. And I think it is very important to realize how much you still have to grow and learn. Like, even in your case, I was so happy when you said that even after Everest, you still feel there is so much longer to go and so much more to do. Whereas for many people, that could just be like, I am done and I have done the top mountain. So talk to me about obedience and humility, and how do you think the mountains and these expeditions bring out these two qualities in students?
Now, when you come there, you introspect. You get to know a lot about yourself. And when we see the nature, when we see how vastly the science is working behind, making everything work, your existence or my existence on this planet is not going to be of any relevance after we are gone. Or probably it will be of relevance if we do something meaningful with our lives. Right? So we are here just for fraction of seconds in the history of the evolution of humankind or the evolution of this earth. It makes you humble, right? It makes you think about when you see the environment around you, when you see the nature around you. It is not the houses that are built for which would last for 100 years. These are trees and mountains we are speaking about, which have been there for millions and millions of years, have seen the witness the history of our ancestors, will witness the history of the generation that will come after us. That makes us feel very humble, right? Just being there, people sometimes do not realize why is it that we are getting such feelings when we go to the mountains. Usually it is because it is carrying that much of a history with itself, because of its existence, because of the calmness that it has, because of the way it still treats you irrespective of your gender, irrespective of your age, irrespective of your religion or your region. It will treat you same, right? It doesn't discriminate. We get to know that how I would, sorry to use the word, but how stupid we were to think of ourselves too great because I'm coming from because I'm coming from an affluent family, or because I'm coming from a humble family, because I'm a girl or because I'm a boy. We go on speaking about how we are privileged and how someone else is not privileged. But then mountain teaches us no one is privileged. Everyone will be treated the same way. Like on Everest, I tell just an experience from the Everest. When I went to Everest, 8 people among us lost their life to Everest, and they came from very different sectors. Okay, there were two who were explorers, Mongolian explorers who had gone to summit Everest on their own, without Sherpas, without anyone. They lost the route and they lost their life. Okay, then there was a Sherpa, known for his skills, known for his being in the higher altitude, and he lost his life to the higher altitude. He got altitude sickness and he lost his life. An African losing his life right next to the summit, 40 meters before the summit. He lost it to the mountains, but he had done Mount Annapurna without oxygen. He had done some other peaks without oxygen. And a bit climber. You would think that I am privileged. I have done so many peaks. I am so much prepared. But the mountain test, it's not enough. Still not enough. You don't get to choose it. I will tell it. Right? So it makes you humble. It makes you realize that you need to stay humble. You need to accept facts, and you need to take a faster decision, because mountain is going to treat you without any kind of biases. It is going to be same. It is going to be ruthless with you. Take a decision when the call comes. Right? So I think that's how the outdoors teaches you a lot about yourself. If you don't learn, the outdoors are going to come in heavy on us if we don't learn from them. Expeditions fail, people lose their limbs. Sometimes people spend a lot of time in the mountain without any medical aid, and people come back broken when they don't listen to the mountains, or when we don't listen to the mountains. So I believe we have to listen to the outdoors, we have to listen to the environment around us, and we need to reciprocate. If it is giving us a sign, we need to listen to those signs. We need to learn from them. We need to listen to it, become some what we call nowadays active listeners, But I believe not many of us are active listeners because it's a loosely used term. Nowadays, the attention span is not more than 2 minutes, they say. So when it is about listening to nature, 2 minutes, there is nothing that nature is going to tell you. It is going to take hours and hours to tell you just a simple message. And if you don't listen to it, if you miss out on it, the consequences are heavy. Right. So that's the way that mountains teaches you being humble. It teaches you how to listen, how to be more human, how to have those human connection with each other. Because when nothing is working for you during those hard times, when nothing is working for you, just a simple hi, just a simple hello, or a word of encouragement from your fellow climber means a lot. Then we realize that even if I have the phone, even if I have AI with me, it will still not have that impact on me. That human touch will not be there with me until and unless I'm talking with friends, until and unless I'm building those relations with them. So it is a very profound way of learning things from the outdoors. Not directly per se, but yes, it counts.
Yeah, it goes back to what you were saying about interdependence and human relationships, where on the mountains, the level of authenticity is next level. And I completely agree. Like when we were cycling from Manali to Leh, something as simple as a biker or someone in a car waving their hand and giving like a thumbs up or shouting some encouragement is what would keep you going for 5, 10 more kilometers when you are physically exhausted. So it is absolutely unbelievable. I think that, and it's something that I think a friend made like a funny comment, which is actually a very serious comment, which really stuck with me. Which is we're talking about how the mountains treat everyone the same, and they were saying how in normal life there's always these like segregations. You have economy class and business class and first class, and you have shortcuts, and you can pay your way into things. And for the mountains, pretty much everyone is in economy class. No amount of money or resources will get you into business class or first class on the mountain. I think that's such an important lesson, especially for the teenagers who come from these more affluent backgrounds, who have really not had to struggle a lot for anything in their lives, which was very much me all the way up to these expeditions and then university, where everything was always handed to me. I never had to struggle and reach out for anything. And I think this builds character unlike nothing else for those students and those teenagers, especially. It comes as the biggest shock value for them. So I completely agree. I've been kind of hinting at this question since the beginning of this episode, but I think I waited a long time to ask you this question because we slowly were answering bits and pieces of it. But I'm going to just explicitly ask you the question, and feel free to share any anecdotes or stories also that come up. But since you've spent decades in the mountains, so not even years, you've built a whole career as a mountaineer, gone and done so many expeditions and spent time in the outdoors. What would you say are the top life lessons you've drawn from nature and from the outdoors, which also inform how you live your daily life, even if you're in the city, even if you're working in ISL? How do those lessons translate into your day to day activities and actions?
I would just sum it up in uh, 4 points. The first one is that simplicity goes a long way. So from the mountains, I have learned to keep things simple. If you complicate things, it is never going to work out. Right. The second one is that hard work always pays. So no matter if you're getting the results right now or not, keep working on your goals. The third one is your courage knows a language only your soul or your heart will understand. You don't have to prove your courage to any third person or any second person. It's only between you, your heart, and your soul. Right. And the fourth one, and the most important one, is that having a purpose in life keeps us motivated to keep trying, especially when the path is tough. It's very important that we have a purpose. Without a purpose, we don't grow. We might grow, but not at a pace that we would really want to grow with, and we stay humble. So it's very important that we have a purpose. We know that we are going to prove things to ourselves, not to the world. Hard work and simplicity. These are the core lessons I carry from mountain back to my life.
I know this is a very hard question to articulate, but if I had to put you on the spot and ask you, in the career you've built in the mountains, taking young people to these challenging expeditions, do you have a sense of what is your own purpose in terms of your life and your career?
Uh, if you would have asked me this 5 years ago, I would say no. But luckily, yes, I do. It's not about you coming up, becoming an entrepreneur. It's not about you doing something on your own, built by yourself. It is about finding a purpose in what you are doing. So I do find a lot of purpose in what I'm doing. Like I was speaking about at ISL with my work, there's a lot of behavioral shift that we get to see and we get to mold or we get to facilitate. And I find a lot of value in it because that's how the future of India and the world is being shaped. We are able to tap on the potentials of each and every child that comes to us. And that's a beautiful thing that I feel is being able to provide justice to the life that I'm living on this planet. I hope that
Beautiful.
makes sense to you.
That makes a lot of sense. I love it. In fact, this also answers the question I was about to ask you, which is what you find most rewarding or most fulfilling about the work you do. And you've sort of stated that it is working with these young students and these young leaders of tomorrow and taking them to a place where you feel very familiar, which is the mountains and the outdoors, and teaching them to find this purpose and this drive in their own lives. Again, if I had to turn this question back to you, I'm sure on so many expeditions you would have had fear, uncertainty, extreme exhaustion, a lot of demotivation, and your mind and body probably keeps telling you to turn back and that you've had enough and it's not worth it anymore. I'm wondering in those moments, if you want to connect this to also your purpose and your why, what is it that keeps you going when it really seems like something is very challenging or almost impossible? So I assume like even in Everest, you may have had certain moments like this. What was it that kept you going step after step until the top of that mountain?
Okay, so I start with my journey when I was going from Camp 2 to it's a journey where I was going through this patch during a hot sunny day, and a day prior my our trek leaders, our expedition leaders had told us to wear our down suits, get ready for the tough climb that is going to be ahead of us. And of course we were going to touch 7,000 meters at Camp 3. So not being at Camp 7,000 meters earlier made me think, okay, I'll go with whatever my trainers are telling and I will get prepared accordingly. So I wore a down suit that was meant for minus 40 degree. However, the next day, sun was bright and shine. I was walking on ice, clear ice. And on top of that, there was no wind. Adding up to all of it, I got dehydrated just in 4 5 hours. And the climb, which was supposed to take 1.5 hours to 2 hours, took me 4 to 5 hours, got me exhausted. I was at Camp 3. When I reached the Camp 3, of course, I was not having any altitude sickness, but then it felt like I was done with from every part of my body. My soul was even giving up. It was like, why do you have to do this? I was having my ribs were paining like anything. It seemed like it is going to pop up because I was having this thing called kumbuka, and it was there for the 10 days. I had not slept for the 10 days before I reached Camp 3. I was sleepless. I had body pain. My entire back was aching. My ribs were aching. The weight of the rucksack was feeling too heavy. It was much heavier than carrying the load of not being able to summit Everest at that particular time. That is how it was feeling. Not being able to eat anything because of the cough. The only thing that I was surviving on was water. And when I was sitting there in the tent resting for some time, I was not able to get the rest. I was not able to sleep or even, lie down straight on my back because the pain was that much. And I didn't know what to do at that particular time. I really wanted to give up. A part of me was telling, this is stupidity. Why do you have to still go on? Don't you have a good life ahead of you? Why you like troubling yourself? And that is when I realized, after when all these thoughts goes, right, you have a positive thought and a negative thought coming in your head, keep colliding between both of them. You keep talking to yourself about positive and negative thoughts, and all that matters is which one are you going to listen to. So the positive thoughts that came to me was the purpose, right? The importance of having that purpose that I was carrying with myself to Everest. Now, if I speak about the purpose why I was there, I was representing all those women who were in their 30s, mid 30s, and late 30s, who were stereotyped. Not all are, but yes, who were stereotyped were the type of people that I was resonating with. And if I go back, if I choose to listen to the other side of the stories that my head was telling at that time, it would have led me to stepping back from Camp 3 itself. And then when I would have come down, people would have told, see, I told you will not be able to do it. Right. So that went kept going into my head, and they would go on stereotyping again to all the women, especially who were already being looked down. They will again be looked down, saying, see, someone tried to prove and see what happened with her. So that purpose and the kind of repercussions that followed the purpose if it is not achieved was something that weighed heavily on my mind. And it kept making me think, why shouldn't I go ahead? And then the second one was values. I've always believed in a simple theory that if you have not given your 200%, not only 100%, but 200% before giving up, have you done justice to the task that was given to you or you took for yourself? So at that particular time, I started asking myself honestly, have I done justice to it? And have I given my 200%? Is this enough? Am I done? Can I not really work any further? So when I started asking these questions to myself, because you can't lie to yourself, right? You can lie to the world, but you can't lie to yourself. So that is where the answer came that no, I'm not even done with 100% right now. And the third one is your belief, any faith that you hold to. It's very important to have a belief. Now, during those fragile moments, I look back, I had Lord Shiva's idol with me, which I was carrying with me throughout. I used to talk to it. It used to give me some sort of a reassurance that there is a divine power working with me. Uh, I took it in my hands at that particular time and I started praying to it. I started talking to it. Whether I said, Lord, if it's not your wish, give me a sign. Show me a sign and I will turn back. If you don't want me to come to you, to come to the Himalayas, which is known as the abode of God, I said, just show me a sign and I'll turn back. You won't believe I was holding that idol in my hand. I closed my fist, and that was when for the first time, I got a sleep of 3 hours. I slept. When I woke up, it was a new Rama. So it is not because, of course, it is not because there was some jadoo happening there. It was because that reassurance came to me. There is no sign. Okay, I have not given my 200%. The purpose is still there. Everything just culminated into telling you just need some rest, recoup, and start again. So those were the three things, and those are still the three things that keeps me going on into anything that I take up or any expedition I take up. And tough times are there. When the tough times hits, these are the things that keeps me going.
The 200% which you said, I think is so powerful. My younger brother Ayan, when he went to Mount Kilimanjaro himself a few years after me, I remember when he came, he summited with a lot of difficulty and challenge. And when he came back, I remember that the self-talk he had with himself before the final push to the summit of about 12 hours was, he said, you can be in pain and discomfort for 12 hours, or you can have this regret for 12 years, or like more than 12 years. But I think that was so powerful, which he kept repeating to himself to remind us that I think whenever we are like aspiring towards a challenging goal or an event, we have this temporary discomfort, but then there is a long term satisfaction and fulfillment that comes from it. So I'm sure today, when you look back on those 10 days of like discomfort and sleepless nights, it feels worth it now that you've had all of these conversations and you've been able to prove that point which you set out to make. In that moment, it feels like the world, but I think sometimes the purpose and where it helps is it puts you into a longer term picture where it's not just the temporary pain and discomfort. You're really doing this for something and someone beyond yourself and for the rest of your own life as well. So it's so interesting to me how this self talk which people have on the mountain is so important. I've seen friends who used to never ever talk to themselves on the mountain and motivate themselves and give themselves that encouragement and confidence. And it's so powerful for me to see, because I think that then translates into your daily life, in the self-talk you have with yourself in daily life challenging situations. Um, Similar question about purpose, now geared towards teenagers and young adults, especially in 2026. I think it's become so common for me to hear of teenagers as young as middle schoolers, age 13, age 14, struggling with depression, anxiety, loneliness, going to counselors, going to therapists. Very unfortunately, some of them are even committing suicide and taking their own lives. And it's so shocking to me that at such a young and fragile age, how they are getting so much into their mind and like having this negative tape that's going on, which leads them to commit such drastic actions. I'm wondering if you, from your own experience working with a lot of teenagers and young adults, maybe many of them who came into the mountains or into the expedition with a lot of negativity, a lot of baggage, a lot of emotional distress, do you feel that that mountains and spending time in the outdoors can be helpful in terms of clarity, vision, positive emotions, and overall finding some meaning and purpose of your life? Like, have you seen this happen to students and young adults who you work with in the mountains?
Well, yeah, I do agree that this is a rapidly changing world now. The adults themselves, they are into still figuring out things, how to navigate through life. Even if they are able to figure out their lives, they rarely have time for the youth, where they could help them with navigating their lives, and they could tell how you can get clarity about your vision, your how to direct your life, how to have a purpose for your life. And that's how the teenagers nowadays are left to themselves to think about how to find purpose and a vision for themselves in their lives. So I believe, yes, the outdoor expeditions, they play a very powerful role during such a time where, you're finding again, there is a lot of thoughts and a lot of chaos going on in the mind. And now when you are going into an expedition that is testing your physical and mental endurance, you've gone through that verge where you're about to give up, right? Where you thought and done with everything. And then you become a new person. You start pushing yourself. You start looking at challenges in a different way in those particular peak experiences or expeditions. That creates a big space for introspection. Once you're done with the entire day, you might remember in all the expeditions, the best of the times, at least for me, was when it was the cooling down period in the evening, when you're done with the trek for the day or the climb for the day, and everyone is sitting and they start talking about what happened during the day and how they felt about the day and how much they are prepared for the next day. Those days, those are the times when students or the youth, they start introspecting. They start reflecting along with their team members, along with anyone and everyone around, and they start openly speaking about what was challenging and how they overcame it. And it builds that, the entire community of challenge seekers. It builds how during tough times, how you can still navigate your way through it. And if you're able to do that after coming back, when you come back to your normal life, since it is normal, it's a slow paced life, right? It's not going at 8 days expedition pace. It is going to go slower than what you had experienced earlier. So it builds that kind of a risk taking capability. It builds that kind of a character where now you are able to be mentally tough to keep going when things are going slow and when things are not pushing beyond. Wherever you would think that it should push now, it should go 2 steps ahead, it is not going ahead, and you are not able to have a clarity. It gives you it helps you in giving that clarity. So I think, yes, expedition definitely would be defined. I would define our expedition successful or a failure, not by reaching on the top, not by covering a number of kilometers, but by the transformation that is created within the individuals who come for that expedition. If the change has happened, if the transformation has happened, if they are able to now be more resilient, be more disciplined, be more empathetic, and if they are able to regulate their emotions, then that expedition is able to do justice to the purpose of that expedition. Usually, we do not go with saying expeditions would be a success only if someone summits to the top. Like you already said, right? It's the transformation that happens during the journey. The goal is not to reach the goal. The goal is only the journey, the transformation during the journey, right? And I have witnessed, I would not lie, I have witnessed this profound shift in students. They begin to appreciate the importance of a regulated life. They recognize how small habits like regular exercise, eating healthy, staying with or associating themselves with students or with friends who are positive and who would support them in terms of achieving their goals, that leads towards achieving larger goals in their lives. So that is what they carry from this smaller part of their lives, 8 days expedition and 10 days expedition. but goes a long way when it is about navigating their life and finding purpose and meaning for their lives.
I think especially for all those teenagers who are listening, who very much like me can be so like such overachievers and all about productivity and busyness. For me, I think some of the biggest value from these expeditions is just getting time away completely from that normal life, that normal routine, being able to spend a week in the mountains, detach from work, detach from the internet, detach from the world, and just think about what direction I'm heading in, how the last couple of months have gone, how the next few months will go. I think some of the biggest pivots I've made have come from like these expeditions because again, as someone who's very social and extroverted, oftentimes in the mountains you reach points where you just cannot talk to someone else because you're breathless yourself while you're walking. So you're very much, even if you're walking side by side with someone, you're very much just walking alone and not talking. And I think these moments with myself in the mountains, which I so rarely get in daily life because even if I'm alone, I'm with my phone or I'm with Instagram or with YouTube or Netflix, and so I'm not exactly like with myself. I think these moments with myself and that introspection that made like immense difference in terms of just basic thoughts of where I'm going and how I can shape my life in a better direction and not let things just go automatically, but be intentional about what I'm doing. So I think these were like the biggest, the powerful moments I had during all of these treks and expeditions, like you said. Awesome. I would like to start concluding our conversation. I feel like we covered so much ground and so many topics in the last about 1 hour. We talked about mountaineering, your own journey through mountains, teenagers, how the mountains and how outdoor expeditions help with character, leadership, purpose, human relations. So it's been a very action packed conversation. I want to just start wrapping up. And I just want to wrap up now in a lighter and a more fun and fast paced way. So we're going to do something called the fast fire round of questions, where I'm going to ask you a question. You can answer in maximum one sentence, and it's supposed to be a very fast back and forth, just something fun for the audience. So question one is, what's your dream expedition to do anytime in the next 10 years?
Leading an expedition to Mount Shikhar Bay in Manali.
Awesome. Any specific reason about for this mountain specifically?
Well, I believe that we tend to not take challenges back at our home. So since it's in Manali and this week has not been submitted since 1960s or 1970s, it has been submitted only once. So it's a thought that comes to my mind that why should we not go for expeditions which are rarely covered by the otherwise the common mountaineers? We should do something more challenging and something different.
What do you consider the top three qualities of an inspiring leader in the mountains?
In the mountains. Being empathetic is very important. Being visionary is very important. And then being humble, though you can consider being humble and empathetic being one. And then being people oriented is very important. So paying
Nice.
attention to emotions is what I'm trying to tap on here is very important. Three qualities: empathetic, visionary, and people oriented.
Do you have an all time favorite quote?
I learned this about myself. I developed this code for myself during Everest, and I love it. Alone, I can do treks, but to summit a peak like Everest, I need a team. So
I love
it's
that.
yeah. So it's a. I never understood that before going for Everest. I never understood why people keep speaking about collaboration. Why people keep speaking about team of teams, and why it is important to collaborate. Though I am a person who is people oriented and I would love to collaborate, but I never understood the importance of it. But then when I did Everest, that is when I realized the importance of it, and this is something that always sticks to me now that smaller things can be done by myself, but if I have to achieve bigger things in my life, I need the team.
Last of the fast fire is any one book or movie which inspires you every day. You can mention the name of the book or movie, and then in one or two sentences, you can summarize the main message.
Okay, so my all-time favorite is 10,000 Stitches. It's by Sudha Murthy. So she speaks about 10,000 different stories. She speaks about how every stitch has a story of itself and how it makes a blanket out of small pieces of clothes, which means our life is nothing but 10,000 stitches. So our life is made up of different events and different things that we come across, and then it makes a beautiful story. And every stitch matters, right? So I love that book.
Fantastic. I'll add it to my list. I haven't yet heard of it or read it.
I believe it's a 2 hours or 1 hour read for you.
Oh,
I read it in 2018, I believe, but it has stuck with me till now. So I call it my favorite book.
It's been a fantastic episode. I think I've learned so much from all your lessons and experiences and stories. If you had to wrap up our conversation and now completely focused on the audience, teenagers, young adults, what are your final closing thoughts or your last pieces of advice to listeners as we wrap up this entire episode?
Okay, so if there is one thing that I would want to leave your listeners with, would be the thought that you might feel that it's so chaotic right now. You might feel the goals that you're keeping for yourself is too big. Remember that no goal is too big for any human being. If you've made up your mind and if you know why you want to achieve that goal, there will be obstacles in between. There will be times when you will feel overwhelmed, you will feel very tired, you will feel that it is dragging. But please remember, just at that point, you might be very close to your goal. You might not be realizing the next hump is where the goal is. So keep going. Do not stop. Take those extra steps, and you will be achieving any of your dreams, any of your summits, your Everest by just taking those extra miles. Yeah, that should be.
Awesome. And I think just from my end to sum up the episode, I think we spoke in a context which is more familiar for you, which is mountaineering, outdoor expeditions, and nature. But throughout the episode, I had so many of these insights and aha moments, which I also hope listeners had, about how the lessons you learn from nature and from the mountains and the outdoors translate into everyday life and to all kinds of situations. So, like the lessons you learn from the mountains can translate into your working life, in your academics, your relationships, your personal life, your personal goals. And I absolutely loved that. I loved seeing those cool connections that we were able to make and seeing how those insights can translate into every aspect of a young person's life. I really hope that young people watch this and feel motivated and feel encouraged to spend more time in the outdoors, to go and climb mountains, to go and do at least hikes in their city, and to just get outside the classroom, get outside of their homes and their screens, and just honestly spend some time with humans, with themselves, in nature. I think there's so much to be learned from that. But from my end, this was an awesome episode. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Arya, for inviting me. This was wonderful once again interacting with you. Thank you.
If you have watched this episode until now, thank you so much for trusting me with your time and attention. I hope this episode added value, insight, and practical guidance which you can implement starting today. I started this as a podcast which I wish I had had as a high schooler, a university student, to tackle these big and scary concepts of adulting, career, life choices. It's for all those young people out there who are midway up and happily unsatisfied on their own journeys of growth, learning, and transformation. 3 small requests. Number 1, please subscribe to this channel. Number 2, please be active in the comments, share feedback, ideas, and any guest profiles you would like to see on the podcast. And number 3, share this episode with at least one friend who needs to hear this conversation. Stay tuned, you've got this.